My card's up here. Give me a call, or you can call the extension office. Martha Yonk can answer your questions as well. Okay, and you all have those handouts. All right, next we're going to talk about, once you've frozen that food and you're getting it out, we're going to thaw it before we can eat it. There are 3 ways to thaw food. One way is in the refrigerator. Another way is under cold running water. And that is like, if we're doing a turkey, sometimes we put it in cold water. We need to change that cold water every 30 minutes. And then another way might be in the microwave. But if we do thaw things in the microwave, it needs to be something that we're going to cook immediately, especially if it's meat, because microwaves have hot spots in them. So if you're thawing out a pound of hamburger, there might be a spot in that hamburger that gets hotter than the rest of it. So if you thaw it out, put it in the refrigerator, there's a chance that bacteria could grow and spoil your meat. So you want to make sure that, if you thaw it in the microwave, you're going to cook it immediately. And then we need to make sure that any food that we've thawed out, we need to treat it as very perishable and treat it like, with food safety guidelines as we would any other food. And never thaw on the counter. Okay, storage of food, fruits and vegetables. Usually, if they're kept in the freezer, your electricity's not gone out or anything like that, frozen fruits and vegetables will keep 8 to 12 months. Poultry, 6 to 9. Fish, 3 to 6. Ground meat, 3 to 4. So we need to keep that in mind. Ground meat is one of our biggest food safety hazards that we have, because once that meat is ground, it gets so much air on every little piece of it. Every little piece of it touches all that equipment. So ground meat is something that we really have to be careful with. And then cured or processed meats, 1 to 2 months in the freezer. I also have up here a handout for you all on storage of all kinds of different foods. And you all put, okay. And this goes into just about every food that we store in our kitchen, whether it's refrigerated, buttermilk, cheese, eggs, poultry products, shellfish, meats. It goes through all different kinds of foods, vegetables, fruits, and baby food, cakes, cookies, just about everything, and dry shelf storage. I had to go out the other day and buy new baking powder because my can of baking powder was, finally looked at the date on it and realized how old it was. And we need to replace our spices and the things that we bake with, fairly often too. We need to check those dates on them.
How long after the date should you keep it?
Like a spice?
Yeah. Or baking powder, baking soda, or
Baking powder, soda, I would go by the date that's on the box.
whatever.
Yeah, when it says that it expires. Because when we bake, when we're using baking soda, baking powder, we want, those have to be a chemical reaction for our things to rise. So we want to make sure that we're using good in-date products. Now our spices will keep about a year. So in my house, there's only me and my husband, so I try to buy small containers of spices, unless it's cinnamon or something that we use quite a bit of, because they will get really old on you, and you need to replace those as well. I mean, they will hurt you, but they just won't have the flavor or the smell, or they just get old.
Does it help to freeze your spices
You can do that.
to
Yeah,
prolong the
would,
life?
Yeah, that would work. That would prolong. Spices are so expensive. And I like it when I can find those little small containers, because there's some spices that we don't use very often. You'll get a recipe that might call for a teaspoon of something, and you may never use it again. Okay.
You go to Walmart, you've never heard.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, there are some foods that don't freeze well. Vegetables, cabbage doesn't freeze well. Celery, lettuce, parsley, and these are a lot of these that I'm talking about here that don't freeze well have real high moisture content. Potatoes or other high starchy vegetables don't freeze really well. Fruits, pears don't freeze really well. Foods with eggs or milk, shell eggs or cooked eggs, meringues, icings, milk sauces, sour cream doesn't freeze well. Cheese or crumb toppings. Now I have frozen cheese before, And you can use that, like if you've got shredded cheese, you can freeze that, and then use it in cooking. I've never really frozen any like sliced cheese, or anything. It never lasts long enough in my house to make it to the freezer. Mayonnaise, salad dressings, and dishes with mayonnaise and salad dressings in them don't really freeze very well. Gelatin, and then most fried foods. I know we like our fried green tomatoes, but once we fry those, they're not going to freeze very well. When you thaw them out and try to eat them, the product's not going to be very good. Now, what about a power outage? We have quite a bit of those around here, don't we? Our electricity flicks on and off, it seems like quite a bit. But we need to make sure that when that happens that we do not open our freezers. If we have a full freezer, it will keep frozen 2 to 3 days if we leave that door closed. Now, the only recommendation that I have on that is that you eat your ice cream immediately. And that's just a personal preference there. And again, ice cream never lasts long enough in my house to really, for 2 or 3 days that it's gone. But, that is a good excuse to eat your ice cream though. But we need to discard any food that has been below 40 degrees for more than 2 hours. So, if the electricity goes out for a really long time, like days. I know sometimes people live way out in the country, and a couple of years ago it went off for a couple of weeks for some people. So they really struggled, to get the generators going to keep those freezers and to save that food, because that's a lot of money that you can lose. And also, if you have something in your freezer that might have been contaminated with meat juices, if it's dripped on them, we need to make sure that we discard that. When in doubt, we need to throw it out. You'll never take a chance of getting food poisoning or making someone in your family ill. That's not fun. Okay, so points to remember with freezing. We need to make sure that we're using only quality fresh produce. We need to make sure that we're working under very sanitary, very clean conditions. We need to use proper packaging, follow the recommended instructions. We need to package to remove air leaving a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of headspace so that can expand. We need to label and date it. And you all, that is really, really important. I always tell this story on myself. In the summertime, if I have like steaks and I trim the fat off of them, or if I have a ham and we have leftover, fat or whatever from like a ham we baked in the oven, I take that and I put it in the baggies and I put it in the freezer and freeze it. And then on garbage day, you throw it in the garbage and set it out on the curb. That way that meat's not sitting in your garbage, tempting the wildlife and the dogs in the neighborhood to tear your garbage up and have it all over the road. But one time I hadn't done that, and we went on a camping trip, and I pulled something out of the freezer and put it in my bag or my cooler. And when we were camping, what I thought was a bag of ice was actually a bag of frozen old meat fat. So we need to make sure that we label things, but and look at things when we take them out. I know probably some of you all have been in this situation where you pulled something out of the freezer and what you thought you were going to have for dinner turns out to be something different because you thawed out something that wasn't labeled and it wasn't what you thought you had. Place packages in a single layer until frozen, and that way they'll stack really neat and really tight and easy in your freezer. Keep an inventory, thaw it properly, and enjoy it and use it. It doesn't do you any good if you leave it in the freezer and don't use it. So, again, don't put anything in there that you don't intend to use, and use what you put in it. Does anybody have any questions about freezing? Okay, I'm
So
going
if you're in the market for a freezer, do you find the uprights better, easier to use than the chest type, or is there any, just for
I like the upright ones because you can get into them. The chest ones, I always have found that things get lost in the bottom of the chest freezer. Don't they, Carol? You don't find things for a month. I've got a little freezer that's about this tall because there's just the two of us, and it has a door on the bottom, on the side, not on the top. So I don't have to lean over and dig around in the freezer. It just makes it easier to do. Okay? Any questions? Moving on. Okay, now we're going to talk about drying. Okay, drying foods. Y'all, drying foods is the absolute oldest form of food preservation that we know of. They have been drying foods for since ancient time. We have been drying foods. How many of y'all do dry foods in here?
I want to learn. Now, do the mountain people, when they have shucked beans, have they been blanched?
Probably not. I can
That's what I
remember
thought, probably not.
when I was a child, we never blanched them. We just strung them
I've
and
never
strung
heard
them.
of blanching beans,
Mhm.
for drying, but I've never dried them, but I'm gonna start this year.
Mhm.
So I wanted to be sure.
Yep, you really should, but I'm gonna talk about shucky beans here in a minute, because they're one of my favorites. It's one of the oldest methods of food preservation, and, you know, like I said before, we need water, we need temperature, and what was the third one we need? Just like bacteria? Food, we need food. Okay, so drying takes away that moisture. So that's the premise behind it. Dried foods are really popular among hikers because they don't weigh very much. A lot of people, like you'll watch if y'all have ever seen those shows on TV where they're prepping, you know, for disaster or whatever. A lot of people are drying foods because they're easy to store. They're very popular. Today, more and more people are eating dried foods as snacks. I noticed in Walmart the other day, our little tiny Walmart has like a whole shelf just of dried foods, and they're outrageous, very expensive. I bought this pack of blueberries. I can't remember how much they were, but they were quite expensive. But they have all different kinds of cranberries and cherries and all different kinds of dried food that you can. Next time you're in the grocery store or in the other store, take a look at. Drying foods, you can store it for long periods of time. Again, it's depriving the bacteria of water, so the mold, the yeast, you know, you take out that water and they don't have that, so they don't decay the food. Drying is done by placing food in an environment with low humidity, usually at a temperature between 130 to 140, 150. If you're doing meats, it needs to be about 160, but we're going to talk about that here in a minute too. But we need to make sure that we are using the proper temperature to dry these foods. I tried drying some tomatoes one time and just tried to do it in the air, you know, in the air in my kitchen, and all I got was mold. It was just way too much moisture in the air. Hence, for drying, we need to control the air flow and the temperature. That's why the dehydrators are so important. And we'll talk about this one here in a minute too.
When recipes call for sun-dried tomatoes,
Mhm.
can you do that yourself?
Not in Kentucky, I don't recommend it,
Okay.
but you can buy them in the store.
Okay.
We just have our humidity is too high in Kentucky for that. We need to pre-treat our fruits and vegetables, again, whether with blanching or with the salicylic acid. We need to use a safe drying method, and we need to store these foods properly. You will find that drying is kind of a learning process, isn't it? Wendy does quite a bit of drying. But when I first started drying, you know, you'll think things are drying, you'll take them out and you put them in a plastic bag, and the next day you'll feel of it and it's moist again. So then you end up putting it back in the dryer. So a lot of times it's just a constant checking of your dried foods to make sure that they're done properly. Choose a proper method for drying, and it's not, we're already talking about that. Okay, let's talk about methods of drying. She just mentioned sun drying. Now, sun drying is really popular in some places, but we do not recommend it in Kentucky because you need a temperature of 85 degrees, and that is a steady temperature of 85 degrees. And and that's not at 85 degrees when it's raining. It's a steady, hot 85 degrees. And in Kentucky, you all know we don't have that. Our weather changes, every 15 minutes in the state of Kentucky, so we don't really recommend that. Vine drying is what we use for mature beans and peas. I have some beans over here that were vine dried, and what we mean by that is at the end of the season, you know, you've got your green beans that you've not picked in, you know, that you've left on the vines. They dry, they rattle. You can take those in, shell the beans out. They're dry when you can when you can hit them with a hammer and they shatter. That's when they're dry enough to be stored. And these beans came out of the garden right over here. I think I stole them out of my neighbor's garden, but after he was finished with it. But these are dried greasy grits, I believe.
What's the difference in those and the ones you would save for seed?
Nothing.
Nothing? That's what I found.
But in order to eat these, you have to soak them in water and cook them like you would a soup. And they're delicious, by the way. Green beans. But you do have to keep in mind that things that are dried like that, things that are dried like this, you mentioned earlier, the stringy of the shaky beans. What happens to these beans that are sitting out there on the porch?
Flies are sitting on them.
Flies are sitting on, exactly.
Dust is getting on
Dust is getting on, road traffic, flies, all kinds of
Cats are
things.
playing with them.
Yeah, exactly. I can remember my grandmother would take apples and beans. That's about, when I think of drying, my memories of drying are apples and beans. That's all we think about when we think about drying, some of us in eastern Kentucky. But that's what I remember her drying, and she would do it in the attic on a sheet. She'd lay a sheet down, but again, you've got flies and things that are in the atmosphere. So that's why we kind of recommend using the dehydrators.
Now, would it be okay to put your dried beans in, say, Miracle Whip jars if they were thoroughly clean
Sure.
and dry?
Yeah,
The plastic, it'd be still be all right to put them in
yeah,
plastic?
as long as it's clean and dry and seals. You want to make sure you keep the moisture out. And if you do the beans in this way, they say the best thing to do is to put them in the freezer or to put them in the oven before you pack them to kill those insects and what insects, larvae or whatever might be on them. So we can put them in the freezer for 48 hours or in an oven at 165 degrees, and that will kill the insects or whatever's on it. To test for dryness, again, shatter it with a hammer for the dried beans. Microwave oven is another way that we don't recommend drying. Microwave ovens were not meant or designed for drying foods. What we do with microwave ovens, we thaw and we pop popcorn in them. That's about it. Corn's actually excellent cooked in a microwave oven too. Oven drying is a very long process, but you can dry in just a regular oven. But you need to make sure that the oven goes down to at least a low temperature of 160 degrees. And a lot of ovens don't do that today. And if it doesn't go down to 160 degrees, and your oven's probably going to be at about 200 degrees, you're going to cook your food and not dry it. So we don't really recommend using the oven either. And it's an expensive way to dry foods as well. So, because we definitely don't want to cook it. Unless we're doing deer jerky, but we'll talk about that in a minute. With air drying, we can do a lot of herbs in this way. Herbs are better dried when you just take them and tie a string around them and hang them up. And put them out of sunlight in a dark place. I dry my herbs in like my guest room. You can either put like a sheet underneath them because when they dry, they drop. Put some, just something underneath them to catch it. Or you can put them in a paper bag, poke holes in the paper bag, and hang them. That's just the best way to dry herbs. Yeah. Sage, and we'll pass these around just so y'all can smell them. Another thing people grow and dry today is lavender. And this is an example of that. You all may want to pinch a little piece off of this and smell that. Lavender is really easy to grow. Herbs are really easy to grow. Fresh basil, if you all like basil, this is one of the easiest herbs ever to grow. I can even grow this stuff. It grows really easy from seed. Now, I have dried basil before, and I think I've got a jar full of it here somewhere. I think that's it. Lavender. You don't eat lavender, but we brought it anyway. Basil is an herb that dries really well. It's wonderful if you use it fresh. If you're using dried herbs in cooking, though, you need to use about 1/3 to 1/4 less of the dried than you do of the fresh. One other way that I preserve my basil is I wash it, of course, and dry it, and then I just pull the leaves off And I'll take a piece of plastic wrap. Or wax paper. And then I kind of just bunch them together and then kind of roll it up like a cigar. Get a piece of corn out of it. Just roll the fresh basil really tight. Then I put them in freezer bags and put it in the freezer. And then when I want to use it, I unroll it. After it's frozen, it'll turn colors on you. It'll turn like a black, a real dark green, but it doesn't affect the flavor of it. And then after it's frozen, you can just simply take it out. You can get it out of the wrapper. And then I just take it and hold it over whatever I'm cooking and just snip it off. Very easy, very quick, easy way to do that. So I'll have a couple of rolls of fresh basil in my freezer this at the end of the summer. That's another one that smells really, really good. It's wonderful with tomatoes, great on pizzas, put it on sandwiches. It's just a really, really good herb. Okay, now I've lost my clicker.
That's right.
By the applesauce.
Ah, thank you. My glasses too. Okay. Any questions on herbs? Does anybody in here dry their own herbs? Sage is really good too.
I drive mine in the car.
Do what?
I drive mine in the dashboard of the car.
Uh-huh. One way to do it.
Next.
That's a clean, safe environment.
I've seen people do that all the time.
That's a really good way to do it too. Keeps the flies out though. Okay, and then the way that I've been drying lately is to use an electric dehydrator. And you can get all different kinds of these. They come in square, they come in round, they come with temperature controls, they come without temperature controls. But I really like this one that I've got, I don't even know the brand of it, but it has a temperature gauge on it. And I really like this because some of them that don't have a temperature gauge on it are just one temperature all the time. This one has a setting for crafts, like if you're drying flowers. It has a setting for meat. It has a setting for fruits and vegetables. And then it has a setting for if you're doing like fruit leathers, which we're going to talk about here in a minute too. But I really like this one. I have several trays. Some of these even come with, I've got corn everywhere. It was supposed to stay in the thing. It comes with these mesh liners that you would put on top of an empty tray to do herbs so that when they dry they won't fall down through the cracks. And then they have these plastic sheets that you can do the fruit leathers on. And we're going to do some fruit leathers here in a minute. But I started these apples today about 2 o'clock. And you can see that it depends on how thick you slice them as to how long they're going to take. I've actually dried some pineapple last week. You all don't dry it. It took 2 days to dry that pineapple. 2 days. And I did not, at the time I didn't have my ascorbic acid, so I didn't put anything on them. And it turned kind of brown on me. So that was just an experiment for me. I know next time if I'm going to dry pineapple, that it's, that I need to pre-treat it. And that I need to cut really thin slices because these were pretty thin, but yet it took a really long time to dry it. And dried pineapple that you dry yourself is not going to taste like the kind that you get in the store because the kind that you get in the store has sugar in it. And also bananas, when you dry bananas, are not going to taste like the banana chips that you get in the store because a lot of times those are fried before they dry. So they've got a little bit of oil on them. Okay.
Now, how long will that pineapple last?
It should last a year, as long as I've got, as long as I keep it in a nice, clean, dry environment. Now, some of these things that I've got up here for you all to look at, like these are green peppers, and they've turned really black. But I did these last summer, and I dried them. And actually, some of this stuff is an exhibit, and I've lunged it out. And I don't know how many people have opened this. I don't know if it got moisture in it. I had a beautiful jar of green beans, and when I got them back, you all can see there's mold in here. And these I dried. I didn't blanch them or anything. I put them in the dehydrator, and I don't know if somebody opened them or if I just didn't get them right. Which could have been the problem there too. I just may not have gotten them as dry as they should have. Okay. You can get all different kinds of dryers. I just have a catalog where we get a lot of our supplies from, and they have several in here. They range in price from $130 to $40. There's one in here for $42. So depending on what you're going to do, if you all are just going to be drying, green beans, vegetables, fruits, a $40 dryer may be what you need. But if you're going to be doing meats, I really suggest that you get one with that meat control gauge on it. Especially if you're doing deer meat or something like that. You really want to make sure that you've got that. Pre-treatment is not required, but it does help preserve the color. We need again to start with good quality fruit and vegetables. Remove the pits, the stems. We don't want bruises. We want our fruits to be just as nice and of good quality as if we were freezing or cooking them. Fruit's harder to dry because it has a high sugar content than vegetables are. Those green beans were dried in a day, where if you had dried them on the strings up front, it may take several days for them to dry. Vegetables, blanch them if you want to. We've got another pub up here on drying that'll tell you how to do that. I did blanch those green beans, and they do really have a nice color. So sometime this winter, hopefully, if I hang on to those, we'll have us some Massachusetts beans. That'll be really, really good. I'm trying to get my husband to like them. And again, same thing, you blanch them, you put them in the cold water. I have some things for you guys to taste. I'm going to taste a little bit of pineapple, and I actually dried some Asian pears last summer too. And you all will get to try some of those. And wash my hands off real quick.
Do pears dry well?
Mm-hmm. These do. These are the Asian pears that they grow here in Quicksand.
I dried some peaches last year too for the first time, and they did pretty well.
They go on now.
Now, for the pears, would
I
you
don't
have to
recall
use a
it.
scorpion acid on them also?
You probably should, but for these I didn't. They probably would have been a prettier color. I think they're pretty. I think they're really pretty. And they taste really good. I dried some at home, a jar like that. My husband ate them in like 2 days. So on this plate that I'm going to pass around, there is pineapple and Asian pears. I'll tell you what, I'll just put it in this basket, and you all can just get you a napkin and a little piece of paper.
Where'd you grow that pineapple?
The backyard. No, I bought it. I dried some zucchini the other day. This is a whole big zucchini, one whole zucchini. So you can see that it really got a whole lot smaller. So when you're drying vegetables, you want them to be kind of pliable. You don't want them to like break open, like crack. And then they're too dry. But you all can tell by the feel of that fruit, the kind of the texture that you need it to be.